Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Jennifer Jones, CMO of RGP. I want to thank you for joining us for today's session on navigating risk in the age of AI. According to OpenAI, 90% of Fortune 500 companies are using AI, and the pressure is on to ensure that these powerful systems are not only innovative, but responsible, ethical, and secure. As this adoption accelerates, so does the need for thoughtful governance frameworks that manage risk while unlocking long-term value. We are so thrilled to have Bart Kimmel, RGP's Vice President of IT Risk Assurance, leading today's discussion. With more than 38 years of experience across internal audit, enterprise risk, and technology assurance, Bart brings deep expertise and pragmatic insight into how organizations can build trust into their AI strategies from the ground up. Throughout the hour, we'll explore what good AI governance looks like, where hidden risks live, and how evolving regulations are reshaping what responsible AI really means. We're offering one NASBA CPE credit for today's webinar. To be eligible for that CPE credit, you just must remain present for the duration of the program and answer the 3 polling questions. Additionally, if you have any questions for us, please drop them in the chat and we'll save time at the end of the discussion to answer where time permits. With that, let's dive into today's discussion. Bart, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Certainly appreciate the kickoff and the introduction as well. So, welcome everybody to our session today. Given the rapid advancements in AI technology over the last few years, especially, and coupled with where we're at from an organizational perspective in really deploying our AI solutions, governance and risk management are not only really important today and certainly for the future, but also relevant and timely. Now, we have a lot of participants here joining today in our session. And by the way, thank you so much for your time. Essentially, everybody is really kind of representing a point in the position within that maturity curve related to AI deployment. And whether you're at the beginning stages, whether you're at the intermediate stages, or really whether you're at the advanced stages, my goal here today is to provide everybody with some information that can move that needle forward in terms of improving and developing your AI governance programs and also your risk management strategies as well. So we got a lot of information to get to, so let's get started. If I can mechanically get us started, here we go. First, I want to start out with a little bit of an introduction to AI. And this is kind of some fun facts related to AI. And this is really, let's get warmed up. Let's get kind of in the AI groove, if you will. And then we'll get to matters at hand. And then we'll get into AI governance. What comprises an AI governance program? And why is it so important today? And why is it going to be even more important in the future? We'll get into that. Then next, I want to get into how an AI system is actually constructed. And so I think it's important to gain some insights in terms of the construct of an AI to, again, give us another insight that can certainly contribute to the development of our AI governance programs and our risk management strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about that and maybe some risks associated with that AI system. Next, we'll get into what is a trustworthy AI and what are the principles around comprising trustworthy AI as well. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to talk about security and specifically, hey, what are the bad guys doing? There's always bad guys, right? And then what can us as good guys do to kind of thwart off some of their efforts as well? So we'll get into that here just a little bit later. And then lastly, we'll get into kind of AI governance frameworks. Now, we have time constraints. I won't be able to get into the details, excuse me, but I want to make sure that everybody is aware of some of the relevant frameworks and consider those frameworks. Not only it's important for your governance programs and your risk management strategies, but it's also important for internal audit and IT audits, important for compliance departments as well. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those frameworks and provide you with that exposure as well. And then lastly, I want to kind of look into the crystal ball. And I want together to look into that crystal ball with all of us in looking at kind of in our not too distant future. And it's really going to be around quantum AI. So I think you'll find that pretty fascinating as well. All right. So this is our first point question. And this is really to kind of give me some understanding in terms of where you're at within your AI journey. So question is, to what extent has your organization implemented AI technology? So are you in the experimentation phase? Are you running small pilot related projects, or are you in the adoption phase? AI technologies where you've integrated a few functions or a few work streams and applications or departments. Or maybe you're in the expansion phase, AI initiatives that are expanded across several functions and departments. Or maybe you're on the integration phase, and that is AI ultimately becomes an integral part of your organization's core processes. Or hey, maybe you haven't started, or maybe you just don't know at this time. And all of these answers are certainly the right answers. So I'll give you a few minutes here to go ahead and put your vote in. Right. All right. So how are we doing, Ellen? How are we doing on that? Are we getting the results in? All I can see right now is essentially the questions. Uh,
Yeah, we have 81% of participants in. It's
oh,
going up
okay.
quickly. I'll leave it open for
All
another
right.
moment.
Okay.
I'm going to go
Fantastic.
ahead and close it out.
Okay. All right. So where are we at? So this is interesting. It's kind of what I would have expected, and that we're all kind of jumping in and putting our toe kind of in the pond, if you will, in terms of AI technologies and AI solutions that are being deployed. And so it's good to certainly be somewhat a conservative in these efforts because this technology does have a lot of impact into our organizations, et cetera. There's also a lot of folks right in the adoption phase, and that's fantastic as well. And I see some haven't started and some really don't know. So, all right answers. Again, thank you for that insight in terms of where you are in your AI journey. All right. So let's move to the next slide. And so let's some fun facts, just to get us started, right? So whether you believe that AI is here to save the world and to resolve and cure diseases, or whether you think AI is here to kind of end the world as we know it today, or somewhere in between, we all have our friend Jeffrey Hinton to thank. He is also known as the godfather of AI. Now, why is he known as the godfather of AI? Let me answer the question. So in the early 1970s, he was working on his thesis, and he was really, really interested in the human brain and how the mind really functioned and how it really worked. And so he set out to build a neural network based on computer technology. Again, thinking that in the 1970s, that technology, suffice to say, that project really kind of went up in flames and it failed. But in the ashes of that failure, the AI seed was planted. Fast forward now 50 years, and we're implementing AI solutions that we never dreamed that we could ever do before. Now, fun facts about his family history. His great great grandfather is George Boole. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar, think about back days in your junior high algebra days, Boolean algebra. Yep, George Boole established that. His great great uncle was a famous surveyor and geographer, and he made significant contributions. And as a result, there was a mountain named after him, and you could probably guess Mount Everest. And then lastly, his father, Howard Hinton, was a famous entomologist and scientist, and he made significant contributions in entomology as well. Now, Hinton, no slouch himself, won the Nobel Prize Award in 2018 for artificial neural networks as well. Now, his prediction, which he predicted a couple of years ago, was that humans in time will be the second most intelligent beings on the planet. That certainly holds true today. And actually, some people believe that we've actually crossed the line around that. So, to quickly switch gears, I wanted to kind of highlight Google's DeepMind experiment from a couple of years ago. Now, this experiment was kind of bleeding edge a couple of years ago. It's kind of lost its luster and its wow factor now just because of the sheer advancements today. And they're working on very crazy stuff related to AGI, which I'll get into in a sec. But essentially, the point I want to make here is that the software is architected different, and in order for what they wanted to do is learn how machines learn to learn. So they created these robots, and they didn't program really anything into the robots related to soccer and playing soccer, other than they had to score. So these robots had to learn on their own iteratively as well. So here's the difference in how machines learn to learn and in a more efficient manner is ultimately how we've developed code, right, for decades. It's very linear in nature. And they shifted the architecture to be a more in layers. So they programmed these robots with layers, and each layer of the code itself was responsible to solve portions of the problem. So essentially, when a robot executed an action with a positive outcome, the layers were informed to repeat that. And the inverse was true that if there was a negative outcome to an action, they would never repeat that again. Ultimately, they kicked and they ran and they played defense and they finally scored. So, point though is that there was a shift in terms of the architecture of the code that helped the machines learn to learn more effectively as well. Now, we refer to AI kind of in general references, right? But we're ultimately more accurately referring to different categories of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to kind of go through these just very quickly and briefly, just to make sure we're all on the same page and aware of kind of some of the things that are happening in the AI world. So, first is artificial intelligence. And this is really a general category that really refers to a machine that's performing kind of a smart task or a function. So, an example would be machine learning. And then also another example might be robotics as well. So that's kind of a general artificial intelligence kind of category. Now, the next is generative AI or Gen AI. Now, we all are aware of this particular AI. We're all embarking to some extent in our AI journey and implementing and deploying this particular solution. And this is an AI that essentially is able to produce content such as music or programming code or images or text. And it really does that based on learning from existing data. Then we get into agentic AI, and you may have heard this. It's a big trend for 2025. I've got some clients that are dipping their toe into agentic AI technology, and some that have actually started to deploy a solution or two in this particular genre. And this is an AI that ultimately is able to learn and to solve problems. Next is artificial general intelligence or AGI. Now, I haven't heard a lot of chatter in public domains about AGI until really recently, and it's really gained a lot of momentum in some of the dialogue that I see going forward today. And this is essentially an AI system that essentially mimics human cognitive capabilities and abilities. So it includes learning, it includes reasoning, it includes problem solving as well, right? And ultimately, it is able to really surpass our intelligence in some knowledge domains, not all domains as well. But again, still in research, still being developed, but certainly a very, very powerful tool from an AI perspective. And then lastly is sentient AI. And sentient AI is a lot of controversy and dialogue, and this is essentially an AI that becomes essentially conscious for all intents and purposes. So it's aware of its environment. It can adapt to its environment. It can show emotion. It can feel emotion. It can build relationships, right? So that's essentially sentient AI. Now, one category that isn't here that is getting a lot of attention, we're talking a lot about, is artificial superintelligence or ASI. And this is essentially an AI that surpasses human intelligence in every knowledge domain, logic, creativity, everything. And certainly it's really being considered by many to have the potential to be that kind of that future development and advancement from an AGI perspective. All right, so that's kind of some of the fun facts related to that. So um, what do we do next? Well, ultimately, I want to ensure that I kind of narrow the scope. Again, AI is very broad, so I want to narrow the scope for today's discussion for the next 50, 45 minutes that we have left and focus on really Gen AI and maybe a wink and a nod towards agentic AI as well. Now, you see 8 different processes or work streams or applications essentially that we are seeing our customers beginning to implement AI technology and solutions around. So, whether it's customer service and chatbots and virtual assistants and doing sentiment analysis, or whether we're utilizing AI solutions and technologies around logistics and supply chain, exciting areas around optimization opportunities for inventory management and route planning, et cetera. Finance and accounting, lots of opportunities to implement AI technologies to assist in fraud detection and prevention or assessing risk and managing risk. Here's a big one, IT and cybersecurity. So it's a pretty well known that the biggest implementation or the most implementations for an AI solution to be deployed is really around IT. And as I had mentioned before, a generative AI that produces code. So here's an interesting fact is that of the top, I don't know, 50 Fortune 50 companies, 50% of their code is now being generated by AI. It's estimated that in the next 6 months, 80% of that code then will be generated by AI. And then within 12, 18 months, 100% of their code will be developed by AI. So significant impact, increasing in efficiencies, increase in activation, certainly very innovative. At the same time, of those fantastic benefits, it does change the workforce landscape. It does change what programmers may or may not be doing, certainly in the future as well. Certainly something to consider. All right. Now, let's see here. We'll go to the next slide. And so now let's switch gears. We'll talk about AI governance. Why is AI governance so important? Why is it relevant today? Why is it going to be more important, really, even in the future as well? And so, again, because of the substantial growth, the exponential pace at which the advancements are being made in AI technology, we're really seeing new use cases each and every day that we really haven't dreamed of in the past few years, certainly. And so while we hear about these AI systems being deployed, we're also hearing about AI systems that are really not yielding the expected outcomes. That is, a chat box that might be misdirecting customers or employees and making the wrong decisions, or AI models that have generated biased outcome, or even worse yet, hallucinating as well. So while we all agree that AI has the incredible potential to change and improve our business as we know it today, it's also, we want to make note that the premature deployment and the premature adoption of AI systems could put companies at huge risk from a reputational perspective, as well as from a financial loss perspective as well. As we continue to rely on our AI models to provide us with information for us to make decisions, for us to make judgment calls, it's that much more important that the outcomes are accurate. And certainly the inverse is true, that if they're not accurate, if they are biased, it can have certainly huge consequences to our organization. All right. So that is why AI governance is so important today. It's more, and it's going to be even more important, certainly going into the future as well. So AI governance is essentially the overall process of directing and managing and monitoring AI activities. Governance has really kind of twofold kind of objectives. The first objective really is to ultimately minimize the risk of this particular technology, while at the same time maximizing benefits that we can gain both tactically and strategically as well. So tactically, we're looking at reduction of risk. We're looking at increasing efficiencies. We're looking at increasing automation innovation, freeing up people to focus on value add tasks that help us achieve our goals and objectives. Now, at the same time, from a strategic perspective, the more that we are able to rely on true, accurate outcomes from our AI solutions, we're able to make decisions faster, better, with more insight that ultimately translates into increasing market share and sharpening our competitive advantage. Now, what constitutes the other objective, I'm so excited about what constitutes that governance model. But the second really objective that I want to point out is it really puts guardrails in place to ensure that our development, our deployment, that our implementation are both responsible and certainly ethical as well. It needs to align to our cultural beliefs, our ethical beliefs, and ensure that it aligns with our overall goals and objectives of the organization. Very important objective. Now, what constitutes AI governance? Policies, practices, procedures, standards, etc., all of which, again, our other governance programs are in place. But again, this is focused on the technology of AI, which is very unique in and of itself. So where do you start? Well, first we start with our existing structure and our building blocks that we currently have and revise those according to our AI efforts and our deployment efforts that we're currently in the process of. Now, today, going forward within our session, I'll provide you with other information that will contribute to continue to revise your building blocks, as well as creating other policies, practice, and standards specific to artificial intelligence as well. All right, so that's the internal focus from a governance perspective. Now, let's flip the coin and let's look at external sources of governance because, again, it's important that these technologies are governed both internally by our organization as well as really putting those particular guardrails up over the big tech companies, over the advancements to ensure that that this technology is going to be used for the benefit of certainly of mankind versus the inverse. All right, so essentially, what we're seeing is more laws, more regulations are being considered based on where your organization at from an industry perspective will also determine kind of the laws and regulations that are relevant to you. So if you're in healthcare, if you're in financial services, if you're in oil and gas, if you're in public utilities, et cetera, that will certainly determine the level of scrutiny as well as the type of regulations that you'll need to comply with. Now, kind of what we're seeing is from a future of the oversight, AI oversight perspective, is we're moving really towards that sliding scale approach. And so you see that here. And essentially, it's really in kind of three levels. And so what we're seeing is from a high scrutiny perspective or a significant amount of scrutiny from your regulators is an AI where consumer outcomes, its fairness, and systemic risks are involved. That's will face certainly the highest level of oversight. The next is moderate scrutiny, and this is where an AI explainability is actually really important but the outcomes are certainly less than life altering. And then lastly is the low scrutiny. And this is, back office processes and operational efficiency use cases where the impact on human stakeholders is minimal. All right. So again, that's really kind of a comprehensive look at AI governance and certainly plays a very, very important role as we continue to move forward in this technology. All right. Next slide. So now we're going to move to the construct of AI, an AI system. And again, this is really important to gain some insights related to how we can improve our governance programs, make them more relevant, make them more acute to what we're essentially implementing and deploying. So you see on the left side of your screen an illustration of a very simple Gen AI model. And so let's kind of talk about what that model looks like and what it constitutes. So first of all, an AI system is designed ultimately to take inputs and produce outputs in some way that will mimic, augment, or aid in the human decision-making process. Now, at the heart of the system is the model itself. And the goal of that model is to look at the input and generate output that normally a human being would perform. Now, how does the model do that? Well, first, we need to start with supplying with data. Now, that data could be structured data, such as rows and columns and values, or it could be semi-structured data, such as XML files, or it could be unstructured data, Word documents, text files, images, etc. Right? Now, if you look at the model itself, you can consider the model to be constructed of and comprised of highly engineered code that utilizes very complex mathematical algorithms. And what the model does is it takes a look at that data, whether it's structured, semi, or un, and it derives patterns from that data and learns how to mimic essentially human behavior that is expected from it that we consume then the output. Now, what are the risk factors associated with this particular model? Well, the first one is biased outcomes. And essentially, we are all, right, as humans, sort of not devoid of bias. In fact, when we're making our decisions, as an example, we prioritize certain parameters and characteristics and attributes, while we minimize or jettison and ignore other attributes as well. And we might be making a mistake. We might not fairly be representing the population of interest. And so as a result, our decisions are negatively impacted to some extent, depending upon what our bias is and what we decided to exclude, et cetera. And so this can also seep into our data that we input into our model. Because the data is human generated, it could have really some biases within the data that's either being trained or tuned or being input into the model as well. And it could be very latent, but the model is sensitive. And so if there is some bias, it's going to have an implication to the output. So bias is the first risk factor. The next risk factor is really around copyright and privacy infringements. And so we get this data from lots of different sources. It's all consolidated in terms of putting together our training data, developing our tuning data, or also the data that we input and engineer our prompts to inject into our model as well. And so usually, right, you can really expect that there's going to be a lot of sensitive information. It could be IP related information. It could be PII, personally identifiable information, et cetera. And so we need to make sure that we consider this as a risk, because if it seeps out, could potentially get us into trouble in the output. Next is a lack of transparency, and therefore a translation into a lack of trust. So we need to understand kind of what our models do. And the reason I say that is, if we're getting it from our third party hosted vendor, we need to gain insights. We need to understand what that model does. If we can't look into the model to some extent and understand that it certainly has a negative implication to the trust overall of the model. So that is another risk factor, certainly, that we need to consider as we look at our AI systems. The next is insufficient monitoring. And here's an interesting one. This is really around how our AI models mature and how well they perform. So our models, as we continue to engineer our prompts into the model, we may be actually getting close to or actually exceeding kind of the boundaries or the parameters of which the model was trained or which the model was tuned. And as we exceed those boundaries or the parameters, that then in turn will have a negative implication to the performance of the model, and certainly may have an impact to the outcome as well. So we need to be able to monitor the performance of our models over time to eliminate and prevent any kind of deterioration of that model. And then lastly is compliance with guidelines. And we talked a little bit about that in terms of governance and laws and regulations, but certainly as this technology continues, certainly we can expect more laws and guidelines and regulations that we need to be able to comply with. So we need to monitor that to ensure we're in compliance. All right. Let's go to the next slide here. Oops, sorry. All right, so let's go and transition to what constitutes a trustworthy AI model, and why is an AI model that we need to trust important? So let me share a quick story that will kind of emphasize really the importance of a trustworthy model. And here's a story of a person a year or so ago that was going to host a party, and they were looking to kind of create some unique sort of a margarita mix or mixture for their guests as they come in that evening. And so this person went to inquire on a chatbot to get some ideas. And so the chatbot provided some recommendations and provided a list of ingredients. And included in that list of ingredients was ammonia and was also bleach as well. So very toxic, something you really, you obviously don't want to drink. Certainly something you don't want to serve your friends, or at least, most of your friends. And so this really kind of underscores why our models need to be trusted. We need to ensure that the outcomes are accurate so we can make the appropriate decisions. Now, what are the 5 principles? Well, the first principle is really explainable. And that means that the results and the outcomes of our models should be easily understood and also be able to be verified by a knowledge domain expert. So example, if it was like medical information, then a doctor could review the outcome and verify the accuracy of that outcome. Or if it was financial modeling information, then a finance expert could verify the accuracy of the model itself as well. So first is explainable. The next is fair. That is, the outcomes should not have bias. It should not discriminate against the population. It should accurately represent the entire population of interest. So the second principle is really around the output being fair. Next is transparency, and I referred to this a little while ago, but we need to really understand our models. We need to understand what the algorithms are. We need to understand kind of the data that was used to train the models, and certainly if we're getting this from third parties as well. The more we can verify, the more we can trust. So again, whether it's a black box model or a glass box model, we need to understand to some extent what the model does and the data that's trained. All right, The next is systems need to be secured. Our AI systems should be robust and should have robust security around that to thwart off efforts of the bad guys, which, by the way, we'll get to in a sec. But so they can't steal the data, they can't poison the data, they can't execute a denial of service type of attack and bring our AI models down to its knees as well. So we need to ensure that our security wrapped around our AI systems are robust. And then lastly, is from a privacy perspective. Again, sensitive information going in, model making reference inferences around the particular information. We want to make sure that it stays in the model, that it doesn't seep into the output to get us into trouble. All right. So now let's move towards security. Why is security so important? And what are the bad guys doing? And what are us as the good guys going to do to thwart those efforts? So before we get into like the bad guys and what they're essentially doing, is we need to understand kind of the importance from a security perspective. And so let me just share some survey results. And there are lots of surveys that have been executed in surveying different organizations around the world and executives certainly within those organizations. And essentially, the survey was around generative AI systems and the level of trust executives have with those systems. And ultimately, it came back with this: that the majority of executives still have some level of distrust around AI systems and Gen AI systems. And so they had really three primary concerns that led them to not getting to that 100% trust level. And the first was around the cybersecurity and the security around the AI system. The next was actually privacy was a concern. And the last was the accuracy of the model itself. Now, we need to overcome certainly those concerns in order for us to enable us to gain the benefits of this technology and help us deploy more of the technology to increase, again, efficiencies, accuracy, innovation, et cetera. So how do we do that? Well, we need to build a security framework around our Gen AI models, or a security framework around our agentic AI models. Concepts are very the same. What does it start with? First, it starts with the data. So how do we secure the data? And then secondly is, how do we secure the model? And then lastly, how do we secure the usage? So we're going to take a look at the bad guy lens, the good guy lens, and see, help us understand how we certainly can secure data, model, and use. So let's take a look first at what the bad guys are doing from a data perspective. So one of the first things they're going to want to do is poison the data. And this is essentially injecting inaccurate or bad information that is going to be used to input or inject into the model for inferences, and then ultimately creating unbiased or inaccurate outcomes. Next is, because this data is so valuable to the bad guys, right? It's got sensitive information, whether it's got copyrighted information or it's got IP information, et cetera. They want to steal that data, right? So they want to exfiltrate that data. And then lastly, again, there's sensitive information. And if it leaks out accidentally and into the public domain, certainly that's another opportunity for bad guys to steal the data. So what do we do? Well, first thing, again, because all of this data is really coming from lots of different sources and consolidated to train and to tune, et cetera, is we need to conduct really kind of this data discovery effort. We need to understand what's in the model, what data was used to train the model, and then we need to classify that data according to essentially levels of risk to ensure that we put the right security tools and parameters and controls in place that are commensurate with the level of risk. Next, we need to encrypt our data. So in the event that the bad guys steal or get information that are leaked out into the public domain, they can't read it. And then nextly is related to how we set up our security around it from an access control perspective. And so two-factor authentication, user IDs and passwords aren't going to cut it. We know that. We've seen it time and time again historically. That's a great vector for and an easy vector for bad guys to break and to gain unauthorized access. So we need to implement multi-factor authentication around our data. And then lastly, we need to monitor the data. So we need to ensure that if there's folks that are stealing the data, that we know right off the bat, and certainly we can then put the appropriate countermeasures in place and minimize any exposures that we currently have. All right. So now from a modeling perspective, well, what are the bad guys are doing? Well, before we talk about that, let's take a step back. Almost all of our organizations, not all certainly, but many organizations are not going to develop their AI models from scratch. That is, we're not going to develop the code. We're not going to, develop, various mathematical algorithms, et cetera. It's way too expensive. It's a huge effort. And certainly the resources are very scarce with that deep and narrow knowledge to be able to do that. So ultimately, we're going to go out to a third party, whether it's a hosted third party, really, or whether it's an open source type of a third party. But we're going to go to one of those third parties really to get our models and then to tune the models accordingly. Now, what are the bad guys doing? Well, the first thing they're going to do is look to gain unauthorized access to a third party and then embed malicious code or malware into the model. Then we acquire it, put it into our infrastructure, and then now we're vulnerable to that malware and malicious code. Next is from an API perspective. For example, if we're using a third party that's hosting a model and we use an API to communicate, bad guys will look to inject bad information to negatively impact the performance of the model and the outcome as well. Next are plugins. And so if you're using plugins to escalate privileged access, certainly that is a vector the bad guys are certainly look to take advantage of as well to gain a privileged access to the models to implement their bad intentions. And then lastly is an IP attack on essentially very sensitive information related to very important information to your organization as well. So intellectual property. So now what are the good guys doing? What can we do to thwart off some of those efforts? Well, the first thing I want to mention before I get into scanning the systems is we need to do our due diligence. We need to think of these vendors as we would any other vendor. So we need to apply the appropriate vendor management and risk management strategies in terms of the particular company or organization or source to ensure we're comfortable. Do they have the appropriate controls in place? Do they have the security controls in place, et cetera? Is their performance from a financial perspective comfortable with, are we comfortable with that as well? So we need to do our proper due diligence. Then we need to scan our models as we acquire them to ensure it doesn't have malicious code that's embedded or malware. Next, we need to harden those models as well. So if there are any default configuration parameters, if there are any default accounts, et cetera, that we remove those or revise those immediately. Next, we need to ensure that we apply the principle of least privilege access, certainly to our privilege escalation efforts and activities. So we need to have a human in the loop to ensure that the privileged access that's being escalated is proper and that it's terminated as soon as it's not needed as well. And then last, we need to look again at the source and ensure that we're not going to get into any problems or trouble related to copyright information as well. All right. So now let's take a look at certainly the usage and the usage in terms of what the bad guys are doing. So what are they doing? Well, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to want to execute prompt injection. And prompt injection is essentially a user that comes in and basically tries to jailbreak the generative AI model by issuing commands to have the systems do things it was not intended to do, ultimately resulting in biased or inaccurate outcomes. So number one, by the way, the number one vulnerability according to OWASP is essentially prompt injection. Now, if you're not familiar with OWASP, they produce a report on an annual basis to list out that top 10 number one security vulnerabilities from a cyber perspective. If you're not familiar, you can get that and download it from the IBM website as well. Really interesting. I'm sure your security specialists do have that and are very familiar with that report. All right, so the next is denial of service. So they're going to perform a denial of service attack essentially, which is sending lots of attacks to the system to essentially bog the system down and to overwhelm it so it can't keep up anymore. And then lastly, from a model theft perspective, this isn't essentially what you're thinking of in terms of actually guys coming in or gals coming in to steal and lift and shift that model. It's really focused on efforts to re-engineer your model that ultimately result in, right, stealing your model. And so what the bad guys are doing, well, they'll gain access and they'll start to uh, input and engineer prompts with the design of a specific, getting a specific knowledge in terms of the outcomes. And they'll do that thousands of times to understand specifically at a granular level what the logic is around the model, and then essentially re-engineering it, which again results in stealing your model. So what can we do? Well, the first thing is going back to monitoring our model inputs, right? But in this sense, we're looking really at abnormal activities such as injections, such as denial of service, and those types of things, in order to put countermeasures right in place and to minimize any exposures. The other is that we should be adopting, right, and I'm sure your security people have this, adopting updated detection and response tools. And so this is specifically designed for artificial intelligence. They're called machine learning detection and response. And so certainly ensuring that we adopt, implement, and that we execute those tools as needed would be important for certainly securing our AI solutions and models. And the next is applying kind of the fundamentals that we currently are performing in our infrastructure, our networks, et cetera. And that is event management tools. So security information, event management, and security orchestration, automation, and response tools to, again, monitor the inputs and monitor the data and monitor the activities so that if there's something that's abnormal, we know about it and we can solve that problem right away. All right. Our next polling question. So here we go. To what extent is your organization's AI security program aligned with current guidance and frameworks? Are you at the baseline stage, which is recognizing AI? Are you at the developing stage, basic security controls? Are you in the integrated stage? AI security is embedded into your cybersecurity and strategy, or at your optimized stage. So we'll give you just a few minutes to go ahead and cast your vote. See, we should have some music right now that kind of passes the time away. I'm not going to sing for you, but maybe Ellen or Jennifer might be one to step up. But any event, hopefully you've been able to cast your vote, and we'll get soon to the results. And here are the results. Again, this is really kind of in line with with where you're jumping off into your AI journey from an organizational perspective. And so I probably expect that many are either baseline or in that developing stage related to your security programs where you're at currently today. So again, thank you for that. Certainly appreciate it. And we will now move forward to the next. All right. So here are a list of auditing tools and certainly frameworks. Again, these are really important. They're important to develop and to revise and to make sure that your AI governance programs are relevant, right, and that they're impactful. They're important for internal audit and IT audit to begin to develop their risk and controls matrices and identify control designs and build their audit programs as well. And certainly compliance. It's important for compliance as well. To be able to be aware of these particular tools. So if you're not aware of some of these, here they are, and certainly you want to consider them as you kind of continue in your governance programs. The first is NIST AI Risk Management Framework 1.0, and this was published actually a year ago. To be honest, it's July of 24. And this provides great information in terms of best practices around governance and other domains and policies and procedures, and then also, expected control activities. So this is a really good framework, certainly for governance and internal audit, et cetera. The next is ISO 42000. ISO 42000 is really kind of focused more towards overall kind of governance, right? It's the policies, it's procedures, it's the practices, it's the roles and responsibilities, and certainly something that we want to consider a really important framework as well. And combined with NIST, you really have a very comprehensive a set of roles, responsibilities, practices, and also control activities as well. ISACA, they have an AI toolkit. So for you IT auditors, right, you can go out to ISACA and you can get and obtain their AI toolkit to assist you in your efforts. IIA has an auditing framework as well for artificial intelligence as well. And then lastly is EU. The EU AI Act is an act, certainly it's into law. So for those organizations that certainly that are doing business in EU, you probably need to comply with that. It has some pretty significant teeth like GDPR, 7%, up to 7% of your global revenue. And this also, though, can be used as a framework. It's really organized in different levels based on risk. So based on risk, it will outline kind of expectations and objectives, and then also certain control activities as well. So another source of a framework and a compliance matter that you certainly need to attend to in the EU. All right, so last polling question, and this is, what are your thoughts on the potential impact of quantum AI on industries and technology? One, are you skeptical, thank you, related to quantum AI, and you find it interesting, but probably not practical at this time. Maybe you're cautiously optimistic, and that is quantum you think has a potential, but lots of advancements and really need to be put into place for it to be practical and viable. Maybe you haven't thought around its being an emerging potential, and that is, well, quantum certainly is beginning to show promise in terms of optimizations and security and other factors as well. Or maybe you believe this is going to have a transformational impact, and that quantum AI will revolutionize, right, and revolutionize and enable breakthroughs in cybersecurity, or when you haven't really thought about it or consider it because you're focused on right AI technology that you're deploying today, all of course, which are right answers. And we'll give you just a few seconds here to go ahead and cast your vote. And while we're waiting, certainly, quantum computing is a fascinating technology. We're going to touch on a little bit of that here in just a second to give you a little bit of background if you haven't investigated that up until this point. But it's certainly an emerging technology. It's bleeding edge, but it has potential that is far beyond, what we really understand today. And like I said, I'll get into a little bit of that, but I'm very excited about that technology and certainly implications from an AI perspective. All right. So,
Bart, really quick, I just want to give you a time check, probably about
yeah,
5 minutes.
yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
no problem.
All right. So we're a little dispersed on this. So it's interesting. Some folks are really cautiously optimistic, which is absolutely a right answer for sure. Some haven't thought about it. That's I would expect certainly that as well. And then some believe it has some sort of a transformational impact. So it's really kind of getting to understand kind of this technology, getting kind of plugged in a little bit more, and probably will get you some insights in terms of where that technology is heading, and it may alter kind of your thoughts in terms of what your impressions are of that technology. All right, so let's kind of move to quantum. And so to wrap up our session here in the next 4 minutes, I want to spend just a second or two with us kind of crystal balling and looking into that crystal ball in our not too distant future. So if AI today, with its rapid advancements and potentials, are not enough, we also have quantum computing on the verge of changing everything as we know it today. Quantum, this will sound a little dramatic, but quantum really kind of taps into the very fabric of reality to process information in ways that essentially defy classical limits and classical thoughts. Now, when paired with AI, quantum systems become even more profound, thousands of times more profound than our current AI technology today, in accelerating learning, in enhancing decision making, and pushing the boundaries of machine cognition really beyond what's achievable today. So, the convergence of AI and quantum really could or will define to some extent human progress and usher in a new era of innovation. So let's quickly take a look at what sets quantum apart. So here we have two essentially mazes, and we'll kind of investigate and look at kind of how both architectures solve a problem. But essentially, you can think of classical computers, which is based on right silicon chip technology, as ultimately millions of light switches being turned on and off, zeros and ones, to perform tasks and to solve problems. Quantum, on the other hand, is based on atomic architecture. So it's based on atoms, electrons, and photons, depending upon the quantum technology. And not only can you think of it as millions of light switches, but millions of light switches with dimmers that can assign values that are infinite in between 0 and 1. So a classical computer will take a look in solving the problem in this maze to identify that one path that has an exit. And so what the classical computer does, it will go trial and error to solve the problem one path at a time, second path at a time, third, until it finally gets to that path where there's an exit. Now, on the other hand, quantum will be able to look at all pathways and all options simultaneously and identify that pathway with an exit as well. So very fast, extremely powerful. All right, quick crash course on quantum. The basic unit of information on quantum is qubit. What we do is manipulate these atoms essentially, and what we can do is assign or represent multiple values simultaneously. It could be a 0, could be a 1, could be multiple values between 0 and 1 as well. And what we use is quantum gates to control the atom. So we can rotate it horizontally, vertically, diagonally in order to have that particular atom to have its multiple values as well. That's called superpositioning. Entanglement is essentially increasing your processing power, and that is processing power. And that is essentially taking your qubits and linking them together one at a time, 1 qubit, 2 qubit, 3 qubits, and ultimately increasing your processing power. Now, quantum doesn't come without its challenges, certainly, and they're very sensitive. If you think about atoms, and we're slowing down the molecular motion of an atom, and we're assigning, various variables assignments and values to them. They're very susceptible to noise, to vibrations, to temperature shifts, right? That would create errors in the processing. At the same time, we're building technologies around offsetting those sensitivities called superconductors. The interesting thing about this is to slow down the motion of the atom, and for us to manipulate it, it has to be at absolute 0, which is negative 460 degrees Fahrenheit. The last thing I want to share with you is actually the state of quantum supremacy. And this is essentially quantum computers being able to solve problems that would be impossible for classical computers. And certainly we believe we are there, and some people believe we've crossed that line substantially. All right, to wrap up, what does this all mean to us? And certainly, how will it impact us? And why do I bring this up? Well, quantum AI really has the potential to reshape our organizations, to reshape the value in the workforce, to change what the workforce really looks like, and what is going to contribute to organizations, and what we need as an organization to be able to compete and to be successful, right? So we need to understand and become literate around quantum. We need to be prepared for this technology, because ultimately the estimates, believe it or not, are anywhere from 5 to 20 years that we will see relevant implementations of quantum AI. So it's coming, and whether we're off, 5 years or so, give or take, it will be here. It will impact us, and certainly will have powerful implications, and some of which we really don't know, which is where kind of the anxiety comes from. We don't know to what extent, and certainly the changes that it will require as well in terms of its implications. Now, remember, quantum is really here for us, and AI technology is to amplify us in our capabilities, not replace us as human capabilities. Now, the last that I want to leave you with is that what's going to set us apart from this being a Hail Mary or a Pandora's box? And by far, the thing that's going to set it apart is governance. Governance will determine, to our extent, whether it's going to be a Hail Mary or whether it's going to be a Pandora's box. And it's not just governance from an organization, but it's national, it's international, it's global. It's really going to take us to shift how we think of ourselves as a species and be able to control this technology in order for it to be really come a Hail Mary. So I want to thank you so much, very much for your time. And I'll now turn it over to Jennifer for closing. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bart. Well, before we get started with a couple questions, just a couple quick things. I know a few people had issues with either the way their name was displayed or even the polling questions.
Mhm.
Ellen's put all three polling questions in the chat, so feel free just to answer them in the chat because we want to make sure everybody gets the credit. And then secondly, if you feel like your name may not be displayed right and that's not the what you need to have on your CPE credit, go ahead and put that in the chat too, and we'll go back and look at that. We want to just make sure everybody gets that credit for being here. So the first question, Bart, and Bart, I emailed you these with some answers too. So if you want to pull it up on your phone, it might help us kind of quickly power through them.
Okay, here we go.
Uh,
Hold
the
on one
first
sec, everybody.
the first question comes from Michelle Oliver, and I think it's a really great question. And it's what are some key questions that could be asked to help quickly assess what falls into the three areas of scrutiny? So high scrutiny, moderate scrutiny, and low scrutiny.
Great, thank you. And certainly I've got your email up, and so I will respond accordingly. So here's kind of some thoughts around that answer and guidance around that. And first question would really be around, does AI impact individual rights? Does it impact safety? Does it impact livelihoods, which will determine kind of what bucket? And certainly if it's high scrutiny and has significant impact, then it would be within that bucket as well. Um, could the biased outputs really result in unfair or discriminatory outcomes would be another question that you'd want to take a look at. And then is this used in critical sectors like healthcare, like finance, like criminal justice, et cetera, for hiring? And then would the failure of the AI, the solution, cause harm to individuals or the public as well? Again, that would certainly result in high scrutiny. And then lastly, is the AI making autonomous decisions without human oversight? Would be certainly the last. Now, to move forward and go into kind of that moderate scrutiny, there's certainly some questions that you want to ask. So does the AI need to explain its output to users or your regulators? Is it used in decision support versus decision making, which is a big difference, right? Could errors impact trust or operational performance, but not safety or rights as well? Is the AI used to influence things like marketing, like forecasting, or other customer support as well? And then lastly, again, this is a great question. Thank you for this question as well. Is the AI primarily used to improve back office or operational efficiencies? Would errors have limited or no impact on people as well? So these are some questions that you can certainly consider in terms of what bucket and where you would lie from a regulator scrutiny perspective. Thank you again for that question.
Yeah. So just to recap, high scrutiny, it's going to affect human well-being, rights, or systematic stability. Moderate scrutiny, not life-altering, but potentially could have the outcomes still matter. Low scrutiny, it's where the impact on people is pretty minimal and indirect. So great response there, Bart. So I think we have time for one more.
Mhm.
Um, Eric mentioned, please comment on validating, and I love this question because I think it's really important. Please comment on validating the output of AI and at the same time avoiding duplication of efforts. So for instance, am I going to have to just reperform the entire task over to make sure that, we don't have any risk or issues here?
Right. Okay. So essentially, instead of redoing kind of everything manually, one would be to prioritize, right? And review high risk or high impact outputs. And so shifting kind of that reperformance to risk-based validation, right? Use risk scoring for output or threshold out. I'm sorry, to for threshold and outputs as well. And then lastly, maybe focus on edge cases and anomalies and low confidence results. The second would be to validate through sampling and not full duplication as well. So using statistical sampling as an example as well. Lastly, or second to last, really is really kind of building validation into your workflows. So use human in the loop types of things for critical decision points, layering in AI confidence scores, et cetera. Also to consider would be to implement continuous testing or continuous monitoring and in a shadow mode as well. Um, Another would be to automate the validator and then also track metrics to phase out any manual checks as well. So there's some considerations I think that you can think of as well. And certainly, again, great question. Love it.
Yeah. And we kind of have three don'ts. Don't reperform the entire task just to double check the AI. Don't rely on intuition alone, validate through data-driven decision making. And then don't treat AI as, don't trust it immediately. It should be earned and it should not be assumed. Um, okay, well, great. So there was a couple other questions in the chat. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to them, but ultimately we will supply a follow-up this week with kind of the webcast as well as a copy of the presentation. And I know that there was a couple asks for the polling results. Ellen, would we be able to provide that as well?
We sure can.
Well, great, then we'll do that as well. So thank you guys again for joining. I just one quick kind of wrap up moment for us. And thanks, Bart. Great, great,
Yep,
great content.
absolutely.
I know that's all the time we have today, but thanks again for joining us. We really hope you guys got some practical insights into building a stronger, more secure foundation for AI. If you're navigating an AI implementation, assessing risk, or building out your governance framework, we're really here to help. And Bart, if you want to go to the last slide in the deck, we would love to continue the conversation. So we invite you to schedule a one-on-one session with our team. You can send us an email to hello@RGP. You can also email Bart directly at bartkimmel@rgp.com. We'd love to continue the conversation. And lastly, we have tons of great CPE webinars coming up throughout the year. So check out our events page on rgp.com/events. And I'm going to pass it over to Ellen to just kind of do the final wrap up on CPE credit.
Perfect. Thank you, Bart, so much for such an educational and engaging session. And thank you all for participating from a CPE perspective. RGP will issue those certificates. Give us about 3 weeks to get those out, and we'll be in touch with any questions. As you exit today, you will see a survey pop up. If you are requesting CPE, please take a moment to fill out that survey, as it really helps us validate your email address and other information. So thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye bye.